So this class is the Seven Hermetic Principles and the 8th Unifying Principle. I am Nathan Martin.
And I am Aline Vermeer.
And we are founders of the Divine Pollination Hive and the UnityProcess.com. So we're going to look at Hermeticism, and Hermeticism is named after Hermes Trismegistus. And he is the thrice great Hermes. Thrice great because he's incarnated 3 times so far. That's why they call him that. And every time he incarnated, he kind of picked up where he left off and started elaborating even more about Hermeticism. And he wrote the Hermetic Corpus, which is a series of sacred texts that were based on Hermeticism, or the basis of Hermeticism. Okay, in Egypt, Thoth is the Egyptian version of Hermes, and he's the Egyptian god of writing, magic, wisdom, and the moon. We kind of think of this as the divine intellect. He's the scribe of the gods. And so that way that's an archetype that we can embody, where we are able to write the things that we learn while we take a bigger perspective of things, while we rise up above our ego perspectives into the perspective of the divine. So since we're doing a class on the 7 Hermetic Principles, we need to know what a principle is. It has to do with being the first or the chief of something, the source, a foundation. It is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as a foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. And that's the first one is all we're using it for here, not the second definition. So the 7 Hermetic Principles are the foundation of the belief system that actually all religious texts are based on. If you look at all the different religions, whether it's Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, they are all based on the 7 Hermetic Principles. So these 7 principles and the 8th unifying principle that is throughout those 7 are the basis of all religious contexts. Now, a lot of them don't come out and name them, but for example, you'll see in Christianity, in the Lord's Prayer, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. So that is an example of how the 7 Hermetic Principles are embedded in Christianity. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these, understandingly, possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. And that is from the Kybalion, which a lot of people's understanding of the 7 principles comes from. The 7 Hermetic Principles are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Sometimes these 7 Hermetic Principles are known as the law of attraction. Now, most people do not realize that the law of attraction is sourced from the 7 Hermetic Principles, and that these 7 principles are what constitute it. When you are becoming an initiate, you are seeking to master these 7 principles. And, obviously, the more that you progress, you will start to master each of them. And to master all 7 of these and the 8th unifying principle is what will make you somebody who has mastered life, mastered the law of attraction. But it is a process. It's not something that just happens overnight. You don't just read a book and these 7 principles, you understand them. So that's what we're going to be doing a class on now, is 1 principle at a time. Mentalism being the universe being mental. Correspondence being the adage, as above, so below. It denotes that we live in a fractal-based holographic universe. The principle of vibration, where everything is a vibration. There's just different frequencies of vibration. Polarity, not to be confused with duality. Duality is a form of thinking that is split off. Polarity is not split off. Polarity is dual, but that doesn't mean it's dualistic.
Could you give an example, Nathan, of polarity and duality, just to give a pragmatic take on that?
Okay, so a polarity is like the questions and answers. You ask a question and answer attracts to it. You have darkness and light. You have the void attracts light to it. So that's what a polarity is. You have the negative in it. The negative attracts the positive to it. In a duality, you have two things like that are divisive, that are attacking each other, that are in contradiction to each other, and they fight each other. So, for example, you would have submissive and dominant. Those are a duality. You have greed and sacrifice. That is a duality. Those are two sides of the same coin. Then you have rhythm, which has to do with cycles. You have every year you have 4 seasons. That is an example of rhythm. If you have a pendulum that is going to swing left and then swing right and back again to left, that is rhythm. Cause and effect. Every effect has a cause. Not everything is ruled by cause and effect, but cause and effect is in everything. We'll talk about that as well. And that also has to do with logic. Cause and effect and logic are very similar and synonymous. And another word for cause and effect is karma. Lastly is gender. And gender is not a polarity as so many people think. And we will go into and understand that better as well. But we'll do that several classes in. The 8th unifying principle is the mirror's principle. And this principle is unified and it flows through each of the other 7. So it is really kind of helps you to understand the law of attraction better. For example, we live in an attraction-based universe. Therefore, who you are is what you'll experience in the world. So that is the source and the mirror. So in this example right here, when you're looking at this picture, Charlie Chaplin is the source, and then you have the mirrors around him. Now, because we live in duality and things have gotten a little more confusing, it is more like a carnival of mirrors where you can kind of get lost in it. And so it's very important that we learn how to work mirrors so that we can find our way out of the maze. It's also important to discuss the Hermetic concept of God. That which is the fundamental truth, the substantial reality, is beyond true naming, but wise men call it the All, Kabbalion. In its essence, the All is unknowable, also from the Kabbalion. Some people call the All the divine mind. The All is not source, though, as that is our connection to our inner being. When we go inside and we start connecting to our inner being, to who we really are, we are connecting to our source. The divine mind encompasses our source, so our source is part of the divine mind. And one thing to say about this is a lot of New Age concepts, they talk about no thought. They're like, well, we have really poor thinking, therefore what we really need to do is be in the present moment and stop thinking. And they're in this race to who can be the first one to have no thinking. But we live in a mental universe. It's like nonsensical to say that you can't think and you're not thinking. Really, what we've discovered is it's about the speed of thought. How fast are you actually thinking? How pure is your thinking? How reasonable is your thinking? The more emotionally based somebody is, if they're like hyper emotional and very sensitive to being triggered, then in getting upset, and they're not going to act very rational. They have very cluttered mind, and so those people, a lot of times, for them, they just want to stop thinking because their thinking is so cluttered. But if we can purify our mind, then it won't really be a problem anymore.
Could you just before that really quickly maybe just expand on why source as a means of connecting to the inner being is different, and specifically how it is different from the totality of the all?
So the source, you have the source in the mirror. If I go upstairs and I look into the mirror, I get to see myself. I am the source, and the mirror reflects me. So in each interaction, we are both source and mirror. So if I'm interacting with Aline, I am the source who gets to view myself in the mirror. And for her, she is the source who gets to view herself in my mirror. And then we co-create an experience together. So in that way, I am the source, she is the mirror, she is the source, I am the mirror. And we really kind of go into our own source when we start connecting into our inner being. So the more that we purify our thoughts, the more we drop into our heart, the more we are able to really connect and go within, as people say. It's the only way out of this mess is to go within. The more we connect to that, we connect to our higher being, or our higher self, our inner being, and that is our source. Now, that is also the source of all things. As we continue to go in, we start connecting more and more and more and more to the all. So there is a first source, so to speak, on this fractal tree. And the divine mind, the all, it makes up of everything. It's this all-encompassing thing. Now, it is not creation, but creation comes from the all. And that's actually what we're going to talk about next.
Cool. Good stuff.
Any other questions based on principles, the all, anything that we've discussed so far?
I always know that whatever that it's about love, that God is love, and how does it connect to everything you said?
Well, love is a part of God. So one thing that a lot of people, at least in the mysteries, talk about is how love and understanding are the same thing. And that if you look at understanding, well, what is understanding? It's a type of logic. And this logic is connected to empathy. And it's connected to a bunch of other things that we're actually going to get into. So love, at least from our context, is understanding. The Gnostics, the ancient Gnostics called this, and the Gnostics were from Israel, and they called this the Logos. The Logos being the divine word, or the divine logic of God. So it is an emanation from God, so to speak. Understanding. The first Hermetic principle, the principle of mentalism. The universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. The all is mind. The universe is mental. So our universe, the universe that we inhabit, is mental universe. Now, the universe is not the all, because the universe is contained within the all. Within the mind of God, the universe exists. In fact, many universes exist and many worlds exist. And in fact, maybe even an infinite number of universes exist. So this is again why when people say we just need to be in the present moment and stop thinking, it's kind of ridiculous. You can't stop thinking. Now we can have pure thoughts, we can have impure thoughts. We do need to clean up our thoughts. One of the very important things about the mental principle is our perception. Just from a very natural perspective, it's the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. So, sight, sound, touch, feeling, tasting. These are our five senses. And now we are going to become aware of things as a result of being able to experience them. But it's also a way in which something is regarded, understood, or interpreted. So here we come to understanding again, which is logic, which is love. We have to be able to understand something. And when you have a certain viewpoint of it, you can have a very limited viewpoint of it, or you can have a very broad viewpoint of it. And also there's things that we can't even comprehend of yet. We can't understand yet. So for example, when the Europeans came in on their boats, I believe this is a story of Pocahontas, but I might be wrong. But I know that when they came in on their boats and they visited America for the first time, the Native Americans, when they looked out, they saw clouds. They didn't know what it was. They interpreted, they understood it as clouds. Yeah, so the Native Americans saw the boats as clouds. And so as the ships were coming in, they didn't have a frame of reference. They didn't understand what they were seeing. They didn't have any perception of it. They had no way to process it until they got used to it, obviously, after time. But that was something they had to develop. Their perception of was this new technology that came in. It'd be the same thing if somebody saw aliens back in the Middle Ages. They wouldn't have any kind of a logical framework to conceive or perceive. They would call it gods. They wouldn't understand that these were people from other dimensions or people from spaceships and stuff like that. Perception comes from percepire, hopefully I'm saying that right, and it means to seize and to understand. So we see again that understanding is really, really, really vital to this mental universe. A perception can be closed, open, focused, or broad, depending on their ability to take in new information and process it in a logical manner. An individual's ability to perceive can be refined or stagnated depending on how their mind is trained to think. So can somebody give me an example of what you've seen in the world with a closed mind and how that closed perception is detrimental to their life?
I've got an example. I was just thinking about, particularly in relationship to what we've been talking about recently with victimhood and how people look at a lot of their problems in life, the conflicts in their relationships, and then at the big scale of things, with your huge SJW movements, with like the victim complex. And so, people don't actually look at problems with a frame of reference in the way of, how am I contributing to the pattern? How am I contributing to this problem? What is my relationship to the problem that is being manifested and that I'm looking at? Everything is, I'm a victim to the circumstances. I have an external locus of control, and I get triggered by anybody who says anything that compromises my ability to be a victim and therefore, not have any personal responsibility in the situations. And that's why these people who are stuck in these extremely disempowered victim states of being, when they hear somebody who talks about, personal accountability and responsibility, they'll be so triggered that they'll just do whatever they can to destroy that person's character or blow what they've said out of proportion, or not even really understand what they're hearing, because they don't, at the more unconscious level, which is stuff that we've talked about as well, at the more unconscious level, they're, deeply trying to avoid personal responsibility because they don't know how to be personally responsible and what that actually means, because everybody's energy is entangled. But that would just be one example with the victim mindset and problem solving.
The victim mindset's very closed, and then somebody comes to them who has the ability to be open, and the closed mindset's going to really attack the open mindset. Okay, sweetie, can you give an example of focused and broad perceptions? How to focus our perception, how to broaden our perception?
Not really. I know.
Okay.
What do you mean with it?
Okay, so for a broad perspective, we have what's called multi-logical thinking, or being empathetic in our thinking. Mm-hmm. So if I want to broaden my thinking, I want to transcend my narrow perspective, I need to start taking in other perspectives. So reading books, you're going to start taking in a wide variety of perspectives. Now, you're not necessarily going to believe them all, but you will start being able to enter into them and take what works and discard what does not work and filter through. So the more that you read from other things, and as long as you're doing it without a bias, you're not reading it to prove it wrong. Like, you're not reading the book so that you can find everything wrong with it so you can prove them wrong. But you're just looking at what they have to say just to look at what they have to say. That's called intellectual empathy. And so you're going to be able to broaden your viewpoint, your perception, by doing that. You're going to be able to broaden your viewpoint by working on yourself, by working with others, by going, what some people say, going within to understand yourself better. You're going to also broaden your perspective. Now, a focused perspective is not necessarily wrong in this. Sometimes you have to focus. Like, I had to focus on making this class. I had to narrow myself down into one task and start working on that. And so focus can be a very good thing. I mean, if you're gardening, you need to be focusing on your gardening. and really, put your effort and your energy and your time into that. Now you can be thinking about other things if it's a menial enough task, but at the same time, we still need to be able to focus at the task at hand at times and focus our perception. So it's kind of a choice. So right now I'm going to focus. Right now I'm going to broaden. But it's neither is good or bad unless we get stuck in one or the other, or we find that maybe broadening my perspective is dangerous to me, and then I will go in survival every time I'm presented with something that's broader, or just the opposite. I will go into survival if I have to focus.
Well, and also you can be focused in a closed perception, or you can be focused in an open perception. And that is, I think, very important if you want to really flesh out those words, is that somebody who's in survival mindset, closed mindset, can be very focused on, for example, changing the world, and they will go outside and they will riot and they will kill everybody they will see as villains, and they're very focused on that. So they're closed off completely to the broader perspectives. They're very focused. Now somebody can also be in an open perception and very focused. So they will ask the question, okay, why is this problem here? Why is it happening? And then they will open in their focus with the question, and then they will get all these different insights. And this is also focus. So you can be focused in a closed mindset, and you could be focused in an open mindset.
Good. Are you ready to hear this message? Where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teaching open wide. And again, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. So it's very important that the question is asked to receive an answer. People who don't want to know, who have a closed mindset, they're going to keep their ears closed. They're not going to be able to hear what we have to say. But when somebody really is desiring to understand, they want to know, they want to understand, they want to be able to purify their behaviors, they are going to be open to it. They're going to be able to hear. They're going to be able to perceive. So there's a saying in Christianity about throwing pearls before swine. And don't throw your pearls before swine. So if I was to say something very enlightened, if I was to take this class and give it to the average person that had closed perception, closed understanding, they might not be ready to hear it. Now, maybe eventually they will be ready, and that's not our place to judge. But we can judge if they're ready in this moment. And we can then behave accordingly and not cram it down their throat, because then we're violating their free will. We're giving them an answer they didn't ask the question to.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, there has to be a question, and that's important, that when the question is sincere and the question is really there. Sometimes somebody's asking a question with their words and with their energy. They're just completely in victim mindset, and they don't want to hear anything that takes them and personal responsibility on them. So they will ask the question like, how can I get out of this? What is the solution? And we know we have a solution for them, which is actually the only real solution, is go within and take personal responsibility. But if they're not ready to go there, then that question is nullified. It's not really a question. It's just I want to get my ears tickled. I just want to hear more of the enabling stuff. And you can actually weed out those energies and then be safe from them.
Yeah, not giving people information, can be also an act of compassion and love. We don't have to, if they're not ready, if they don't want it, if they're violently opposed to it, we don't have to give that to them.
And it would actually also be arrogant to think that our information is the right thing for everybody in this moment, because everybody's at other places in their lives, and they need to find their own internal path. And if we're not a resonant match to that path in that moment, then it would be wrong for us to assume.
Yeah, we violate their free will. We are now or in that way, it's elitism. But there's certain occultists out there that are very elite. And when I say elitist, they are very much in judgment of what they, the sheep, or they call them the unbegun, because they have not begun their inner journey. They are the unbegun. And another word for these people are muggles. You have the wizards and you have the muggles. Another way that it was said in history was the Jews and the Gentiles. Gentile literally just means muggle. Jew is a metaphor for the wizard. layers of mind. Since we live in a mental universe, there are multiple layers of mind. We have the superconscious mind. This is your oversoul or your inner being. It is your observer self. It is the I. Then you have your conscious mind. It is the conscious aspect of yourself. This is your thinking. It is the me. You have your unconscious mind, which is your feelings and emotions and your logic. Then you have your subconscious mind, which is the genetic bloodline, DNA, and your behaviors/actions. Now, a lot of people, for the subconscious mind, they will call that the superconscious mind. What we call the superconscious mind, they call the subconscious mind. So our definition is different than you're going to see traditionally. For us, the subconscious mind is the genetics. What?
Can you please say it again?
So what a lot of people call the subconscious mind, we make the distinction and call that the superconscious mind, the oversoul. But for the subconscious mind, we say that's the genetics, your DNA, and it has to do with your relationship patterns, your behaviors, your actions.
Okay.
So that's encoded into your DNA. So there is information in your DNA. And as we change our thoughts, so as we go through and we change our conscious mind and our unconscious mind, we work through things and process, we're able to actually change our genetics. Because our DNA changes, the genes in them have these gates and these what's called switches, and the switches change. So then when you have a child, after making these changes to the top layers of your mind, then your subconscious mind will also change. So certain bloodlines.
So you're talking about the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind?
Right now I'm talking about the subconscious.
And the other one was what?
Well, the superconscious, what other people call the superconscious mind, they take our definition of superconscious mind and they call it the subconscious.
And is the superconscious mind is the higher self?
Yes. And it's your observer self. So when you are observing yourself, when you're like, you detach yourself from a pattern and you're watching yourself in the midst of that pattern. So you're acting, you're feeling, and you're observing yourself while you're doing that. You're being your superconscious mind and observing yourself in your conscious thoughts and your unconscious thoughts.
Quick point too, Nathan, just to get you to expand on something, because the notion that that a person's logic is concerned with the unconscious mind and the realm of feelings and emotions, that is often quite a counterintuitive thought to people who haven't really gone into doing emotional work much. They would say, oh wait, hold on, no, logic would probably reside in the conscious mind. So could you maybe just expand a little bit and look and go into how feelings and emotions and the logic part are dictated together?
I do in a little bit, so I will come back to that. So there's two forms of unconsciousness, or being unconscious. The first is when you're unaware of something, and this has a negative connotation. You're just not conscious of it. You don't know it. You're not aware. So when somebody is, we're increasing our awareness. We're very conscious. What that means is that you were not aware, and now you have become aware. You have increased your awareness. So in the second, you've integrated it to such a degree that one has become proficient at something without the need to think about it anymore. And that's a positive connotation. I'll go into that here a little bit more. Not yet. Okay, so in the integrated to such a degree, so when you become proficient at it, you're able to work through something. It's just second nature now. You no longer have to think about it. It's like riding a bike.
Or driving a car.
Yeah, when you first start riding a bike or driving a car, you have to think about doing it, and you're not very good at it. But as it becomes second nature to you, you don't have to think about it anymore. Now it's in your unconscious mind. So our feelings and our emotions are actually the unconscious mind, and that's how when things integrate to a certain degree, they become unconscious. we don't have to think about it anymore. And that's how our logic is. We don't have to, that's what understanding is. Layers of mind with questions. The conscious mind is knowledge, and it asks what questions, when, where, and who. When, where, and who are all what questions, so you could just say they ask what questions, but when, where, and who are also contained within that. That is knowledge. The unconscious mind governs understanding, and that asks why questions. Why questions also have to do with logic and empathy. So somebody who is non-empathetic, they're not very empathetic, and they say I'm logical, I don't look at the empathy. Well, they're really not very logical because they have discarded one half of logic, which is empathy. The subconscious mind, that is wisdom. That asks how questions and answers how questions. So when we go into our behaviors, that is wisdom. So what a lot of people say, you lack compassion, what they're saying is you lack wisdom. It is the action of nurturing. That is the how. Creativity is a mental process. The universe and all it contains is mental creation of the all. Verily indeed, all is mind. So when we create something, when we say that the universe was created, well, what is the universe the all? No, the universe is a thought within the all. It is a mental creation. Where does atoms come from? Are atoms the all? No, the atoms come from the all. It's a thought that created them. So this brings us into reality generation. And this is really important because if we are creators, we are trying to become conscious creators, because so far we've been very unconscious, unaware in our creativity. You first think about it. You then feel it. You then act upon it. And then it feeds back to your thoughts. So now the feedback reinforces. So when you do an action enough, it reinforces your thinking. You become capable of doing something. You feel very good about it. So we have an inspiration or an intention. I want something. I desire this. I have an internalized reason to want it, and I go into action, or I get fueled, and that's E, motion. So E is the energy behind your motion, and that's literally what it means. E stands for the energy of the motion. So if we feel something, we will then act upon it. If we don't feel it, and your parent tells you to go to school, and you don't feel it, you don't want to go to school. I don't feel the need to go to school. I don't want to act upon that, but then they instill fear if you don't, and then you have to.
And then you feel it.
Yeah, then you feel it. Now the fear is motivating you to go to school. And then you have your actions or the experiences. And that feeds back, and then it creates a cycle. So there's 4 levels of learning how to create your life. We have the sleeping victim. They're unconscious and incompetent. They don't even know that they're incompetent. Then they become aware. They become awake to the fact that they're incompetent. They're conscious of it. They're aware of it. Then they start doing things in an attempt to become competent. They're now consciously working at competence. So then you are consciously competent. You're learning how to ride the bike. You're not very good at it, but you're consciously attempting to do it. You're the stumbling creator. And now you become effortless, the effortless creator, because now you know how to ride a bike, and you could stop riding a bike for 15, 20 years, and the next time you get on the bike, you still know how to do it because you are a effortless creator and you are unconscious in your competence. What we think isn't as important as how we think. An educated mind is one trained how to think and not what to think. However, modern education wrongly trains students in what to think, and because of that, the mind becomes conditioned how to wrongly think. So we're trained to think that facts is an education. Oh, I've memorized, when the Declaration of Independence was signed. I've memorized when the Napoleonic Wars happened. Well, that's not an education. That's any fact that can be found in a book. So Einstein, this is purported that Einstein said this in a book by Philip Frank in the book Einstein, His Life and Times. He said, while Einstein was in Boston, staying at the Hotel Copley Plaza, he was given a copy of Edison's questionnaire to see whether he could answer the questions. As soon as he read the question, "What is the speed of sound?" he said, "I don't know. I don't burden my memory with such facts that I can easily find in any textbook." Nor did he agree with Edison's opinion on the uselessness of college education. He remarked, "It is not so very important for a person to learn facts. For that, he does not really need a college. He can learn them from books. The value of an education in a liberal arts college is not the learning of many facts, but the training of the mind to think something that cannot be learned from textbooks." The seven liberal arts. So the seven liberal arts were something that were developed in ancient Rome, I believe by Aristotle. And the first three are called the trivium, while the last four are called the quadrivium. The first three, the trivium, are grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And the quadrivium is arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Interestingly enough, from these seven things, you are going to pick up a lot about the seven Hermetic Principles. In ancient Rome, slaves were prohibited from learning the seven liberal arts, and instead were trained in the servile arts, which were skills necessary for learning a trade so that they could be better servants. Funny enough, this is also true today, where the liberal arts are no longer in public universities, except for Ivy League and liberal arts colleges. So the seven liberal arts are only taught at prestigious universities, which are liberal arts colleges, which are quite expensive, and then the Ivy League colleges and universities, which are also quite expensive. They are the elite universities. But if you just go to a regular state university, a regular state college, a junior college, they are not going to teach you this. And that is on purpose.
You learn in school geometry.
Yes, but not in the way that you would learn it at a liberal arts college, because it also has to do with sacred geometry as well.
Wow, I always wanted to learn it. I always in school we learn geometry and I love geometry, but I knew that I want to learn like something else about geometry.
Yes, the system today is actually designed like ancient Rome. You're not allowed to teach the slaves anything but the servile arts. So all the regular colleges teach a trade. All the regular universities teach a trade. So you're going into all this debt to learn a trade, and you're an indentured slave. Now, unlike ancient Rome, where it was punishable by death to teach a slave the trivium, you can now be taught to anybody. So anybody who actually looks it up can actually learn it without being put to death. Because if a slave was to learn how to do grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and in that order, what would happen? They would no longer be a slave, they would be free.
Wow.
Yep. And they would be
So
dangerous.
we need to make a school and teach people all this.
Yep. A lot of homeschools in America, homeschooling groups now teach the seven liberal arts as part of fundamental training for school children.
Wow, that's so good.
Well, that's a great way to get them taken out by the martial state.
Yes. Well, you know what? Homeschooling has been under attack for so many years in America, but because we create our own reality, they've been unable to root it out. Even in the draconian way things are, they cannot end homeschooling because homeschooling is teaching people to be empowered creators, and they can't stop that.
Wow, that's so good. That's very interesting because through the slideshow, for some reason, whenever you talked about the difference between an open mind and closed mind, I would just keep thinking that for some reason I would just keep thinking that the fact that I learned to play the flute as a child and I learned music somehow broaden my perspective and my way of thinking. I was just thinking about it when you talked, even before you show us this fact. So it's very cool.
And music, if you look at it, teaches the principle of rhythm. So the Hermetic principle of rhythm is there. And you also...
That's why I love Celtic music.
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's a lot about the rhythm, and whenever you tune in with the rhythm, it's something, I don't know, it does something very spiritual. I think it really make your vibration higher.
Yes. So that was the other thing actually I was going to say, is it also deals with the principle of vibration. So both rhythm and vibration are learned from the quadrivium when you learn music. So it becomes something that you innately understand within your system.
We still don't, I mean, I learned the music, I learned the rhythm, but I don't know how to connect between the, it broadened my perspective, it opened my chakras, I guess, but it's not like I know how to use these principles that I've learned there in order to create my reality. So that will be the interesting thing.
Well, you don't consciously know it, but you're unconsciously doing it.
You
So
need the trivium first also.
yeah, you also need the trivium. So the key is the trivium. If you just learn the quadrivium without the trivium, you're going to still have problems. And that's very, very, very important to learn. So the trivium, we're going to look at that a little more. It is the lower division of the 7 liberal arts and comprises grammar, logic, and rhetoric, or rather input, process, and output. So you ever hear garbage in equals garbage out on a computer? It's the same thing. You input something, and if you input the right stuff, and it'll process, and then it'll output on the screen correctly. But if you input the wrong thing into the computer, there's nothing really to process, and then garbage comes out on the other side, or it just doesn't work. You don't get a program. So, if you have really good graphics and stuff, but you don't put anything into it, then nothing's going to come out on the other side, no matter how good your computer is. You have to program it correctly. You have to put in the right input or knowledge, or in this case, grammar. So grammar, logic, and rhetoric, when you work the system in the correct order, you come to truth. And so if you notice on the picture, you see the truth is in the center. You're able to come to the truth through the process of grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
So when you learn this stuff, it just kind of align you with the higher mindset, like automatically? Or, I mean, it didn't...
Well, you can still be externalized with the trivium. That's the problem. A lot of people say these liberal arts colleges and the Ivy League colleges and universities are teaching the trivium, yet people are still enslaved. Well, why is that? It's because they're teaching an externalized form of it. They're teaching people to use it in the world, but not on themselves. So that's the important distinction that we make in the Divine Pollination Hive and the Unity process, is we take everything that we learn from our correct thinking to not only process reality, but to also process ourselves and to work through our own issues. So we're turning our thinking inwards upon itself. So in the trivium method of critical thinking, it mirrors or mimics or is identical to and goes along with reality generation. So the first step is grammar, that's the input. Second is logic, that's the processing. And lastly is rhetoric, and that's actions, wisdom, etc. And then it feeds back. So when you're working the trivium, you need to do it in the specific order. In those questions, you first start with what questions. If you have an issue, you say, well, what is the problem? Where was the problem? Who was involved in the problem? Why is the problem there? You can't really start understanding why until you first have the what. It's very important to have the what. And then you go into the how. Only after you have the what and the why, and you've removed all your contradictions between the what and the why, and you have a very sound why and a very sound what, then you can go into your how. If you're acting without your what and your why, you are being a fool. You're being unwise. Because there is no awareness, no understanding in your actions. So knowledge, so the what equals knowledge. Grammar is knowledge. Why is understanding. I spoke about it earlier in the class about empathy. Empathy asks why questions, and it produces understanding. So if I'm empathizing with you, I'm not acting for you, I'm asking you why questions. So a lot of people want sympathy, not empathy. Because sympathy is related to an action. It's more about along the lines of compassion. Empathy is the middle step. It's understanding. It's trying to understand somebody. Why do you feel this way? What are the root causes? What in your childhood made you think that? What makes you think that now? Why are you thinking this way? I want to understand your viewpoint. That's empathy. Sympathy just says, I resonate with your pain and I'm going to do an action to help stop that pain. Lastly, we have wisdom, or what some people call compassion. But if you have compassion and wisdom without any knowledge and understanding, it's going to be broken. In fact, there's a verse in the Bible, in the Old Testament, or in the Old Covenant, or what's called the Tanakh in Judaism. There is a verse that says, knowledge and wisdom is what truth is built upon, or something like that. And this is above this big building on Wall Street in New York City. What do they get rid of? Understanding. They get rid of logic. They only have knowledge and wisdom. It's a lie. You can't have the truth. You can't have a good functioning society that is healthy without understanding. They've removed understanding.
It's like with modern medicine, you have the knowledge how to treat the patient, you maybe have the wisdom, but you don't have the understanding of why the person is in this condition.
Absolutely. Yes. Very good example.
Yeah. In fact, this is what they do. You go to you go to a doctor, they say, this is what you have, and here's how we're going to fix it. Yeah. Here are your options. Yeah. But they don't tell you why you got it. Yep. They don't actually try to understand it.
They don't know. No, they're not taught to.
Well, they have a false why. They reduce the why to the what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would that look? True. Why? Can you explain that further, Risa?
Oh, well, say you catch a cold or you catch the flu, you say, oh, well, how did you, they might even ask a how question. They might say, well, how did you get the cold? Or why do you have the cold? Oh, well, for me, for example, I work with children and kids get sick a lot and therefore I get sick because I'm working with kids. And it's like, those are the superficial circumstances. It's not the deeper why. They're reducing the sort of co-creation to the fact that you're in circumstances which are reflecting something back to you, for example. So it's not a real why.
True.
Yeah, and they don't even get...
Even worse these days is it's not just the Western medical system that does that. Even learning at university, learning traditional Chinese medicine, it teaches Eastern thinking from a Western perspective. So it reduces that same thing down to the what rather than the how.
Wow.
So, or the why.
Into the why.
It basically muddies it. Learning it in an institutionalized system, it does the same thing because they're framing it with a Western perspective. Yeah. Unfortunately, which is why I nearly quit uni every year.
Yeah. I think that the why is always kind of gets to a blocked space. Like, why did you catch a cold? Because you work with children, and then you don't go deeper, you don't go further, and you're only examining the material, like the I don't know, the material, the.
Well, it's the external why. It's externalized. It's And that's actually very important to bring up, is the difference between the exoteric and the esoteric application of these things. So even if you do learn how to think properly, now you also have to take it to the esoteric, and that's turning it inwards rather than projecting it outwards, which is the exoteric. So if you look at a religious system like Christianity, that is an exoteric or externalized. But if you look at Gnosticism, which is internalized Christianity. And so it's now esoteric rather than external. So we have to take all these things. So they're removing understanding altogether, whether it's exoteric or esoteric. And that makes people easier to control. Funny enough, this also mimics the family unit. The father is knowledge. The mother is understanding. The child is wisdom, the creation. If you look at Father Sky, Mother Earth, and then the things that we create upon the earth, our creations. Nature is the mother, Father is the sky, is the divine in this way. Now, I'm not saying that this is a different metaphor than when you hear people talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. This is a different metaphor. These metaphors don't really line up. So just try to not get confused about masculine and feminine in that regard. But the father is the knowledge. He brings the seed. The seed carries the DNA, the information.
The structure.
Yeah, the structure. He plants it inside through the sexual act into the mother's womb, where the egg meets, which also has information, and they meet and then they attach to the womb. And then it gestates for 9 months or for however long a mother might do it in the animal kingdom, depending on the species. But the mother, the womb, represents understanding, the processing of the information until which time the child is born. Okay, so the child is born. The manifestation happens, the action or the rhetoric, or however you want to say it, the wisdom, the compassion. Yeah. That is the last step. And then it feeds back to the father, and the process begins again. And so this is how the trivia method of critical thinking and how reality generation fits together. So the father is the thinking, the mother is the feeling, the child is the actions. Questions about that?
I don't understand how grammar and rhetoric and logic connects to, like, how learning it connects to everything you said.
Grammar is knowledge. So let's say I have a knowledge of the English language or the Hebrew language or whatever language I'm using.
Okay.
So that is grammar. You understand the language. In fact, spells, you spell a word, you cast a spell. When you write things down, you're performing a magical rite. So grammar is the magician. You are learning the knowledge and stuff like that. But then, when you start applying that, and you're making the sentences and you're stringing them together, you have to have a logical framework from which to take your language and do something with it. You now have to write that down. And as you're writing it down, then you can then speak it. And that is, when you start speaking it, that is rhetoric. A lot of people, like politicians especially, are trained in the art of rhetoric. And the art of rhetoric just means that they're a really good speaker. Now, somebody can be trained in the art of rhetoric and have really poor grammar and really poor logic. In fact, they can be using logical fallacies or manipulative logic. Another word for logical fallacy is manipulation or deceit, deceptive logic. So they're taking their logic to deceive people in a very flowery and rhetorical way. So they have this great rhetoric. They're speaking these flowery words and everybody loves what they're saying. And it's so magical. Obama did this. He put people under a spell with his flowery rhetoric. And I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not on the right. I'm not on the left. I'm a classical liberal. I don't care about politics. But I can tell a deceiver on the right or the left when I see them. Obama, you could count how many times he would actually lie in his presentation by looking at his deceptive logic, because there are actually rules and names for each type of deceptive logic. And there would be he would do 3 to 4 lies per minute. Lies per minute in his speeches.
How do you recognize it?
It's called, you look up what's called logical fallacies, and you train your mind to know what the fallacies are. And then when you see them presented to you, when somebody starts talking to you and they use 15 fallacies or one main fallacy, and fallacy comes from the root word phallera, which means to deceive. So it's a logical deception. It's an error in logic. And then they manipulate you with that. They teach those at universities as well, the logical fallacies, if you take logic courses. So you can still, it's pretty good to take logic course. Because even
so I got it. In this university, they teach how to use they teach all this information in order to know how to manipulate and create or false creation, kind of manipulation. But you don't teach you how to use it for creation from.
Well, yeah, the false logic, they teach you false logic to manipulate people for, if you're writing a commercial. So like people who are into propaganda or doing things for commercializing, so that that you make a commercial, you write a commercial, and you get people to buy a product. That is using a lot of times deceptive logic to get people to tug on their emotions, to pull at them. And so we don't do that. We don't advertise with logical fallacies to pull on people's emotions.
But I wonder if the ones that learn this stuff, do they know what we know? Like, do they know that they're part of this elite that manipulate the masses and
no. This actually
do, but most don't.
Yeah, most don't. And it's like what Nathan said all the way in the beginning with the Jews and the Gentiles and the Muggles and the wizards and all that stuff. From the moment that you put yourself under the label of wizard or under the label of, in this case, Jew, I mean, I don't mean Jew as Jew, but like as this two different things. From the moment you put yourself in the one who's supposedly better and you're arrogant about it, you know nothing. You're absolutely also unbegun. They think that the others are unbegun because they don't know anything. But these wizards actually know everything in the wrong way, and they use it in the wrong way, and they use it outside in, and they use it to manipulate others, and they don't go within.
They're still in survival mode.
Exactly. So they're just as much the unbegun. Yeah, they're not actually doing anything with all the things that they're learning, or not anything real. Like they're all like external locus of control, complete survival, fear, pyramid system. So it's definitely not more powerful than the unbegun. It's actually, they're going way further into the wrong way of things.
They're going into the deception further. Yeah. They're literally, they're the creators of the lie.
Yes.
If we are the creators of a certain type of reality, a life-giving, expansive reality, they are the manufacturers of the lie in this false reality. And then they call that the matrix, this false reality, this false narrative.
Yeah, and they need to control people to have their survival. And we are getting to a place where we want to create individual reality free from everything, where everybody can be free and safe to do whatever they want to create and not be in each other's way anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Slavery and freedom in a mental universe. So in light of our living in a mental universe, what then is slavery and where does it begin? So this is a question for you guys. Where does it begin? Where does slavery begin?
Well, I guess within one's own mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's mental.
Slavery is first mental and then physical. And therefore, what is freedom? If slavery is first mental and then physical, what is freedom?
The same.
Yep, first mental and then physical. So, in fact, the word liberal means free mind or a free individual. And this is where you get the term library, liberated, liberty. They all come from the word liberal.
Oh, by the way, can I add something?
Yes.
So we are being sold on false freedom in a massive way right now in the media and all that. And that is the freedom with sex and the freedom with money. And that is like physical freedoms that if you don't have mental freedom, it's worth absolutely nothing. But people look up to somebody who has sexuality around them. People look up to somebody who has millions around them. And they say, well, we have to follow this person because this person is going to lead us to freedom. The problem is a lot of those people are not free mentally. They're actually toddlers mentally. So following them because they glitter is really following a wrong trail, it's not going to get you anywhere. But it's still very much like we're very much being like guided, herded that way. Like they tug at the sexual thing or the, so on one side they make you like not have the freedom, so that you feel the need for sex, you feel the need for money. And then on the other side, they will like make you go all those trails and follow the wrong leaders because they look sexy or they look like they have a lot of money, or both. That's even worse. Then they will really be getting a lot of victims from that. And yeah, so I thought that was very important. So freedom is first mental. So to say, well, if only I had this much money on my account, if only I had sex every day with 20 men or 20 women, then I would be free. That's absolute BS.
Yeah.
First mental, then afterwards you can do whatever you want, but then it's going to come out more balanced.
Yeah, but in fact, a lot of these people, what are they? They're slaves to their money, and they're slaves to their job, and they're slaves to their women,
and
they're slaves to their status. And now they have to keep doing it to keep it. They have to keep the illusion going. They have to keep the lie going. So they are literally fueling their own enslavement in that way.
Very much stuck.
Yeah. I was just thinking, it's kind of connects to the last slide about when you learn in university certain things that help you to manipulate the masses and such. And I was thinking that I learned sociology, and actually in some percent of the teaching there, I really it uncovered the lie. It kind of opened. It kind of like sociology is a
political science.
What?
It's like sociology is like political science and social science.
Yeah, but sociology, it's like you kind of you learn how you actually learn how the ones on top manipulate the masses. You actually learn it in a certain way. Of course, it's not like 100% pure, but I think that within the university, it's the most last metrics stuff. So
yeah, they do tell you how it's done a little bit, but more so that you can try to have the hope of working your way up that system.
Yeah, that you can be the top of the pyramid.
It's not about breaking free from the system, about how to work the system.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be this too, then you have to do that.
Exactly. And this is why always when they teach me that and how the the system and I was always thinking, yes, but you're referring it for this as that what's important is to be on top. Like, okay, so I'll figure the system and I'll be on top, but is it the most important? Is this what I really want?
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
I came to a really interesting understanding of the whole like law of attraction thing recently, that they've really broken it for people, because we believe that we have to have money to achieve things, or like as you said before, status or things like that we put this thing in the middle that we don't actually want, because we make this third step between what we think we want and what we actually want. So you go, oh, I want to go on a holiday, oh, I need money first, and so it creates a cut, because you don't have the emotional attachment to the money, you have the emotional attachment to the holiday or whatever it is. And so it like that stops us from actually creating our own reality with that.
Absolutely. And then also the fact that we see money, you can only get money if you do stuff that is work. And work in and of itself means not having fun. Because you can have work and you can having fun, but you cannot have both at the same time. And that is actually even worse than the concept of money. Because if you could see the concept of money as something that comes easily and effortlessly from the desire of wanting a vacation. So you just focus on the vacation, the money comes in easily and effortlessly, or whatever is the path of least resistance to get what you want. But if you then say, but I need money, and for money I need to work, and work means not having fun, now you're completely having yourself like in this not, because you need to have fun to get what you want. You cannot go from something unwanted to something wanted. So now you're stuck working and being all like, where's this damn vacation that I was like, now you're 80 years old and you said, yeah.
Same sort of problem that comes in with health a lot of the time too. People think that they need to completely put themselves through hell to go through healing. You know, things like chemotherapy and stuff like that fits perfectly into that process. And, you know, you need to be sick to do the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true. Yeah, very true. And that's part of the enslavement that we're in right now, is that we have so many limiting beliefs that we're not even conscious of. This is part of our process, is learning how to be conscious of this so that we can get the law of attraction to work for us again. Because it is working, but we're so mind controlled to have all these limiting beliefs that we're not even knowing of. Like, it's really an unconscious thing.
We're the law of attraction, where everybody's working it to create their enslavement in a mass scale.
Exactly. They made that up like that. Yeah.
So one of the things that they've done is they've reversed the trivium. They took it out of order.
Yeah.
And that is called a classical trivium. And you can enslave minds when you rearrange the order. So you can either remove understanding or you put understanding in the wrong place. In this case, they put logic first, grammar, and then rhetoric. And I'm going to show you why that's a bad thing. So you start with understanding, and then you go into knowledge, and then wisdom. So there's textbooks, and even there's a Catholic textbook that has this on the trivium itself, and this is the order they put it in.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because, well, not why yet. But that's why, what, how.
Yeah.
Because they want you to feel first.
Yep.
If they can make you feel first and then think and enact, then they've got you.
Now you're in survival mode.
Yep.
The feelings will be anger, fear, and sadness. There will not be high feelings.
Oh, I feel compassion for somebody. I feel their pain.
Fear.
I'm going to now think of ways to help them. Or I see something on TV and there's babies washing up onto the shore. And I feel things now.
Yeah, this literally happened in Belgium.
Yes.
We had newspapers and the media covering the story about what was the big
Syrian
thing?
refugees.
Yes. They wanted us to accept a lot of refugees, and we weren't really complying the way they wanted us to comply. So they started manipulating us like this. And how did that go? They took a 2-year-old toddler, really, really sad, and they showed a picture of the dead toddler by the ocean. It was washed up on the shore, or that's what they said. That's not how it really happened, but that's what they said. And it was all over the newspapers, all over television. So now all of a sudden, all these mother hearts and all these compassionate people were like, oh no, we can't have this happen anymore. This cannot happen anymore. And it's our fault because we didn't open up our borders. We didn't actually let them in. So now we have to come up with ideas to let them in. So they first felt it. They felt this guilt, shame, sadness, fear, anger, and then they went into the what is going on, and they were feeding what is going on. They were not actually telling the truth, but it doesn't matter because the feelings were leading, so the people weren't seeing the truth anymore. And even if you would say something against it, you would get attacked because people would be like, no, you're not compassionate. This comes in place there, right?
Yep. So feelings, thoughts, and actions. So this is what happens if you try to talk to people that are in their enslaved reality generation where they're feeling, thinking, then acting. Now, think of this as the matrix underneath the true reality generation. So you have actual reality generation, and then within it, there's this trapped pattern of it's a negative feedback loop of feeling, thinking, acting. So they're never really going into thoughts, feelings, actions. They're always going into feeling, thinking, actions. Yeah. And this is what happened to you, Sasha, the other day. When you were in that post, you posted something to get people to think about it, but they immediately started feeling. They were thinking. They started using their logic to reinforce in a biased way their feelings.
Yeah.
And then they started acting upon it, and the rhetoric, how they were speaking towards you, was very attacking.
Exactly. And they were geared towards this before you even said something.
Yes,
like these people are.
Of course.
Yeah. They only get triggered into this through feelings, so they will do that everywhere. Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting because this is something that Ole Demigod, I don't know if you guys know Ole Demigod, but he he studies all of the false flag attacks that have been going around Europe and America and stuff. He's got to the point where he can actually, based on all of the information in all of the media that comes out after them, he can predict the next one.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, but what he talks about is problem, reaction, solution, which is their side of it, which is where they create a problem, and then we have the feeling, and we go, this can't happen anymore, so we have the reaction, and then they go, well, here's the solution. So it's like, it's that total manipulation where it's like, we go, how can we help? And they go, well, this is how you can help, and so they have us,
That's how it works. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Indeed. So there's 3 types of mind control. So we're going to look at more types of how they perpetuate this slavery. Soft mind control. Would you like to talk about soft mind control?
Well, all soft mind control is actually, it starts from really early on. When we go to kindergarten, we go to school, that's soft mind control. In a way, the perpetuation of limiting belief patterns that are handed through the family is soft mind control. Media is soft mind control. Things that they put as subliminals in our movies and all around us is all, and in our advertising, is soft mind control. It like moves us in a soft way, but very much all over the place. A very collective thing.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 1950s, they've actually taken some television shows, like they would play the Pledge of Allegiance for people at on TV at like 1 in the morning when all television programming was done, and then you would all of a sudden have the Pledge of Allegiance, or the song, about one of the American songs. Anyways, in that, they actually broke it down, and there was subliminal messages in there. Obey your masters. Consume. Those kinds of things were actually in it. In the 1950s, they were doing this to the American public.
Yeah.
They were soft mind controlling people.
The song, what was it?
Yeah, it was. It was like the music to the national anthem was playing, and they would have a picture of the American flag, flapping in the background on TV. But in that, and it would just be on repeat until like 5 in the morning, when regular programs would kick back on.
This is like, it's not very focused. So if we talk about focused or not focused, this is not focused. This is more global, soft. It takes a longer time, but it's just as devastating as the other 2 that we're going to see in a second. It's just, it takes a longer time. It's more of a blanket thing. Yeah. It's kind of like in Sweden, in 1991, they started the first, how do you say?
Genderless schools?
Genderless school. Yeah, that's what it was. And now we're like 2 decades later. Now all of a sudden there's people going around calling themselves hens because they're not a he or she anymore. The children do not know anymore what they are and who they are. They can decide every day, like, now I'm a girl, now a boy, now I'm a cat. And the schools are completely perpetuating this. Even worse than in America. I know in America stuff is going on too, but in Sweden they started with a soft program of just, okay, we're just going to do this genderless school. We're just going to do this
because we're progressive. We are liberal. They say liberal, but they're not liberal. They're not a free mind. They're saying that this is what a free mind is. It's open to attacking the 7 Hermetic Principles, because that's one of the things that they do is they attack each of the 7 principles.
Yes.
They make you think that reality is not mental but physical. They make you think that there is no gender, but gender is one of the 7 Hermetic Principles. So they attack these things. They,
You think that if you believe in God, you're crazy, you're or ignorant, or if you know that there are evil spirits, you're crazy.
Yes, exactly. And then 2 decades later, a generation later, you see the devastation that comes into Sweden. Like, there is no masculinity anymore. Everything is destroyed. And this comes from soft mind control. So it takes a little longer, but it actually will get the job done. And it's very much blanket all over the world that they're using it.
And soft mind control also goes as far as teaching facts instead of thinking. So if I'm going to teach you the wrong way to think, that's soft mind control.
Yeah.
The school system only teaches facts. They don't teach thinking. And if they do teach thinking, they teach it out of order and in the wrong way, so that to further your enslavement. In fact, I think one of the Rockefellers said that the purpose of schools, public schooling, and didactic teaching in general is to create good slaves, good business class slaves, worker class slaves.
Yeah.
They also use things like the modern art movement. I saw a thing that was saying that the CIA funded the modern art movement in the 60s and beyond, because they basically wanted us to get to a point where we couldn't figure out what the meaning of something was without being told. Because you look at modern art and you go, it doesn't make any sense. Like it's conceptualization without any kind of logical
Basis.
exactly. And you look at it and you go, it doesn't make any sense until someone says, well, this is what it means, you know. And it was very interesting to find out that that was a technique that they used to break down our ability to use discernment.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They're doing it even worse in
Yeah.
American schools now with what's called Common Core, and they give questions that you don't have to actually have the right answer to get it right. You have to follow their procedure to get it right.
Yeah, or like if 10 out of the 12 children says this is the answer, and 2 children says the other thing is the answer, then the biggest group will be the one with the right answer, even if the right answer is not the right answer. But the
Even
10
if-
people decided this is the right answer.
And that's how
so
they're
a group
schooling
said,
now, and it's
"This
called
is
Common
how the
Core. And so let's say those 2 people did get the answer right, but they didn't do it with a consensus. They're actually marked off, and they're the only ones who get punished.
Yep,
The ones with the right answer get punished, and the ones with the wrong answer, because it was a consensus,
Yeah.
get it right.
the group decides.
It reminds me that when I was 6 years old, they taught us how to write and read, and of course they didn't teach grammar. They gave us the words, and we had to kind of memorize to with our whatever. It was horrible way, and I could not learn, and my parents started to be worried because I could not learn how to write. And then my mother taught me grammar, and I picked it up in like 2 hours. In 2 hours I could read because they taught me normally. They taught me the grammar. So it's horrible because I was punished because I could not get along with with their system.
Yeah,
I was punished. I remember myself like just being like I even got sick from that, and I was tired, and I felt so bad about it, and
Yeah, because you're going to put it on yourself. Like, I'm the one who should be ashamed for not being able to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is shame too, because you're not able to be something, you're not able to be good at it. But they're counterintuitive, and that's on purpose because they are attempting to distort the human mind.
Yeah.
And the natural way of doing things.
with math too.
Yes. Yeah. In schools, they're doing it all over the place.
And this is called the Prussian education system, and it was instituted in the 1800s in order to make good slaves, because Napoleon completely rocked Germany, or Prussia at the time. And they were like, and people were like, no, man, I'm not fighting in this war. And all the soldiers walked away. And so they couldn't get anybody to fight in this war. So they implemented the Prussian education system to create good soldiers and create people who would be more obedient. And so this education system was transferred to America in the 1800s, early 1800s, and spread to all over America by 1900. So then by the time the First World War happened, the Prussian education system was well in America, well all through Germany, well through actually most of Europe, the Prussian education system. So now people would unquestioningly fight without thinking first. So that is soft mind control. Hard mind control.
Oh, I have to say it again?
Yeah.
Well, hard mind control is stuff like the military. So you go into the military and you get punished. And it's more focused. So the soft mind control is more a blanket all over, and then you have specific places where you get mind controlled in a more focused way. Military is one of them. Actually, sciences is also one of them. They want those people to be more in the rules and in the that's how I could say it.
The Greek system actually at universities, so the sororities and the fraternities are also hard mind control. So
Yeah. It's the same thing as military.
A lot of the jobs in entertainment, if you are not in a sorority or fraternity, they will not accept you because you don't know how to keep a secret.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to be in on what's going on, the fake news. You have to know that this stuff is faked, and you have to go along with it. And they will only take people who are gullible enough and open to being controlled through this hard mind control.
Yeah. So they will put you more into your survival mechanism. They will trigger you more. They will put you more in fear and all that stuff.
So some religions are soft mind control, and some religions are actually hard mind control. Depending
Exactly.
on, like the cults are going to be more hard mind control as opposed to soft mind control.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I grew up in Christianity, and that was more soft mind control. But if you go to like a cult,
Like FLDS.
yeah,
I mean, even LDS, I think,
Yes.
is hard mind control.
which is the Latter-day Saints, Jehovah's Witnesses is considered a cult. Scientology is a cult. Those are all hard mind control.
Yeah.
Aline, what did you say about scientists?
Well, so you have scientists, especially when they go into higher up, they need to actually be faulty in their thinking because they don't want the people that really know internal how all of it works, because then they can actually not use them. Scientists are used as puppets, so they're used to solve problems for them in the bigger scheme of things, but they don't want them to actually be able to see what's going on and what the consequences are of the things that they're actually creating.
Yeah, science is a religion. Scientism is a religion.
Yeah.
And your scientists are the priests that tell people, the authorities that tell people, what God says.
Yeah. So doctors and scientists, they come from an Ivy League school. They have been heart mind controlled. They are probably more like further along than us, than the little people, right? Who didn't have all those high educations, because they are heart mind controlled. We are soft mind controlled.
Yeah, because they believe, they're now emotionally invested. Their identity is invested into this thing. I'm a doctor. And now there are some good doctors. Don't get me wrong. There are some doctors that are very much going against the narrative, but a lot of times they end up dead or discredited.
Yeah.
So,
on top of which, it's actually, there's things like it's illegal. It's illegal for them to actually say anything outside of the medical model that they are trained in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last one is trauma-based mind control, which is actually the most focused one, puts the person the most in survival mechanism, and will actually fracture the mind and create alternate personalities that they can program to do exactly what they want. So sex kittens come from that, super soldiers come from that.
what is a sex kitten?
And well, I was going to say
Okay.
this now. So this is actually a segment that most people do not know it even exists. And
the movie Manchurian Candidate, which is a movie about a president who was programmed beforehand through mind control and then set in motion to actually become a president later in life to be able to do things. That is an example of hard mind control or trauma-based mind control. Sorry.
If you want to know more about this is actually something I find it very interesting to study this, because it does show a lot about how they do it, and you can trace it back: soft mind control, hard mind control, trauma-based mind control. So yeah, a sex kitten, for example, is a person who from baby on has been traumatized for a specific reason, with specific purpose and structure, to create alternate personalities that will be overly sexualized, and they will then be used as sex slaves to high authorities,
elites,
in specific ways. Yeah.
Politicians, entertainment people, so that they can use them for extortion. Well, we have you cheating on your wife, and if you ever do what we don't want you to do, then we'll show everybody and make a big scandal on the news, and you're ruined. So it's extortion. And
for example, also they will actually put knowledge into this, with facts and stuff like that, into this person in one of their personalities, and then before that personality, there's the trauma that keeps the own personality from knowing it. And then the way that the person that needs to know this knowledge, so this mind control slave gets delivered to the person that needs the knowledge, they will then traumatize this person again to gain access to the knowledge. So they will sexually traumatize this person so that she will then regurgitate the facts that were put in her in an earlier way, and then close her back up and send her back off. And this is how they are actually using mind controls. It's one of the ways. There's many ways, but one of the ways that they can use mind control slaves.
Yes, they
get it. It's like what they find someone that is born and then they do it to her. Like, how do they?
No. It's a multi-generational thing, and it's happening to literally
Millions of people.
Millions, yeah. I would say, yeah, a lot of people. It's happening to a lot of people. If you want to know more about this, you can look that up. I will send you some links if you'd like to know.
Satanic ritual abuse does it. There's a lot of
it's very
murdering.
difficult to tell this in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But it comes down to soft mind control is like a blanket, and it affects everybody, but it doesn't go as deep. Then hard mind control is now they're focusing more on you being in survival mode and you being limited in your thinking because they need you to be in certain spaces, and therefore you need to be more limited. So for example, military and doctors and all that. And then they have specific people who are basically puppets. They are so into their they've been so traumatized from birth till adulthood that they're fractured, and those different personalities are being used to play out certain things.
Yeah, so one personality could be used for sex, being a sex slave. Another personality could be used to assassinate somebody.
Yeah.
And then they go back and they don't even remember the assassination. They don't even know that they did it. There's actually several television shows that deal with this. One of them is called Dollhouse by Joss Whedon. So if you want to watch it.
What did you want to say, Sasha? You want to say something?
Just going to say, like, some of the examples that I've seen are a lot of the elite celebrities. So, for example, Beyonce is one who publicly has talked about her alter Sasha Fierce, and is a completely different character. And like a lot of it also comes down to that age 27. A lot of the conditioning and stuff breaks down. So that's like age 27. You see a lot of them having mental breakdowns, like Britney, Katy Perry, and all those girls are all going to rehab. That's when they go back in to get reprogrammed.
Exactly.
Re-traumatized.
Yeah. So those are the puppets, and it started with the Second World War. They started to perfect this, and then they came to
Nazis
America,
did.
and then
the Nazis did, and then the Nazis came to America via Operation Paperclip.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you had people like Elvis Presley and what's the other one?
Marilyn
Monroe.
They were some of the first mind control slaves.
One of the first successful mind control slaves, yeah. So this is something that is, if you want to know about this, there's a ton of information out there that you could look this up and see the logic of it even. Yeah. It's very interesting. Also to understand how this reality works and how we are being stuck.
Yep. So mind control is a way to enslave people. So there's soft, hard, and trauma-based mind control as a means of enslaving people. Most people get the soft mind control, and they're not even aware of the hard and the trauma-based.
Exactly. But they're looking up. This is the thing. They're looking up to the hard mind control people. So people look up to the military, like, oh my God, these people are serving our country, blah, blah, blah. They're looking up to high doctors and all that stuff. They're like, woo, they are so much smarter than me. But they're actually hard mind controlled. And then you have even on top of that, and then you have people like Beyonce, like what you just said, and Miley Cyrus, which millions of people are looking up to these people, wanting to be these people. Yes, wanting to be these people, seeing sex and money around these people, saying this is what I want, and unconsciously they're asking for mind control. They're asking to be mind controlled.
Yeah, they're creating their reality to gain more mind control to go further into that. That's why you have sites like TMZ, and you have the different gossip magazines, and everything is talking about the celebrities this and celebrities that, and talking about what's going on with all the celebrities. Some of that
and
is,
then a celebrity does something and everybody does it, like the ice bucket challenge and all that stuff. Like, oh my God, somebody famous did this, so now everybody's gonna do this. And sorry, Sasha.
I was gonna say a weirder example of that was apparently on stage one night, Beyonce's earring got pulled out and made her ear bleed. Hundreds of her fans cut their ears in solidarity.
Wow, that is
oh my God.
That's even shocking to me. Yeah, well, see, that's what I mean. So that's soft mind control persons looking up to a trauma-based mind control person, saying, we want to be like you. Dumb. Okay. Yeah, that's a very, thank you for sharing that.
Good
It's
example.
a very good example. Crazy example.
Okay, so you have an emotional trigger versus a mind control trigger. And funny enough, emotional triggers have been mind controlled as triggers recently. So the universities and the SJWs and things like that, the social justice warriors, are being triggered into being triggered. So they're giving permission to have their feelings hurt and to be upset when their feelings are hurt. So rather than being, given permission to encouraged to be responsible for their feelings, they're literally being told that they don't have to be responsible for their feelings and that the people that made them responsible are upset. And so there's a mind control program running through the media right now, giving people permission to be triggered. And all the news outlets, when they're reporting on these problems that are happening in the world.
And to dominate with their triggers.
Yeah,
That's
to
what it
dominate
is,
people with
dominate
their triggers.
with the triggers. Yeah.
So, but an emotional trigger is, I'm upset, I get really angry, we yell.
Yeah.
She yells at me, I yell at her, we're in an argument, we're triggered. And then we process our emotional triggers and work through them. But a lot of people don't. They're just like, you made me this way. No, you made me this way. And then we decide and we fight to see who is the biggest victim.
And who is the most vicious, actually.
Yeah.
Because then you will start to plot revenge. Instead of actually trying to figure out where this emotional triggers come from. It's like, you hurt me. Your fault, not my fault. And now I'm going to figure out a way to get you back. And that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, that's an emotional trigger. But what is a mind control trigger then?
Well, a mind control trigger is actually, I could do with a specific mind control slave who has specific patterns, I could do a hand signal. And with a hand signal, they would switch alters. So, like, there's an alter in me that's, like for example, Beyonce. Beyonce is also Sasha Fierce. And if she has a handler, which she does, she has a handler, the handler knows how to switch the alters. So he can decide when the other person is supposed to come out, when they need the other identity to come out. This is a different type of trigger. But it will actually create a complete shift in this person.
Yep.
To a different identity.
Yep. The second Avengers movie actually does this, where they have the Black Widow. She does a specific hand signal and touch on the Incredible Hulk, and he becomes Bruce Banner again. So he comes out of his Hulk stage and comes back to the Bruce personality, which is the other thing. So the Hulk is actually a mind control slave now in the current Avengers franchise.
Of course, they flower it with her being nice and helpful to him, because a handler is a nice person, right? A handler is somebody that nurtured you and keeps you safe. And that's how you want that dynamic to stand. So in the media, they show you that. In the movie, they show you that as a good thing, a safe thing. Yeah,
that the handler is the friend of the slave, not necessarily the owner or master.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of different ways that you can do a trigger. So if I was to put somebody under hypnosis, you can do different triggers for them to cause different things.
Like a chicken.
Yeah, we can.
That's a typical thing.
You can give a certain command, and every time you say the command, they'll cluck like a chicken. Or, if you have them put their hand on the table, you can, do a hypnosis session, and their hand will be stuck to the table until you give the trigger. Then they can, the mind control trigger, then they can take their hand off the table.
Yeah.
So there's all different kinds of ways you can do that. You can even do it with an orgasm. You'll see there's these groups doing orgasm, not groups, but there's what they call stage hypnotists. And the stage hypnotist will do a show, and he'll program them in with a trigger where whenever he says this word, the woman will go into an orgasm. But they can only do this with certain people who are weak-minded.
Exactly.
A muggle can be mind controlled, a wizard cannot be.
Well,
speaking of muggles and wizards, in one of the Harry Potter stories, I don't think they actually go into the film, but in one of the books, a teacher is doing one of the 3 curses and showing them in class, and one of the first of the 3 curses is the Imperious Curse, which basically puts somebody under an impressionable hypnotic state. So you can manipulate people to do what you want. And in the sort of scene where the teacher does it on Harry, I guess because Harry, I don't know, might be a metaphor for a sovereign being or a, whatever, somebody on the path, he is actually able to resist it even when he's in a state of the kind of blissful hypnosis.
Yep, exactly.
So anyway, just another little extra dimension.
Yeah. And in Divergent, they show the same thing. In Divergent, they show all these people were mind controlled, and then there were a couple of people who just didn't get mind controlled.
Yeah, there are divergents, and that was actually the name of the show. Divergent was showing these are the people that can't be manipulated.
Yeah, but you have
and they're attacked.
You have to have a really big grasp on your own mind to be able to get there.
Yeah, if you are really taking control of your body, your mind, your thinking, your feelings, everything that you are as a person, and you are becoming a whole self, then, they can't do anything to you in that way.
So in that way, it's very important to know that we talked about muggles and wizards a couple times now, and I think you have to see that there's two types of wizards then. You have the wizards that are the ones who are leading the muggles, that are actually trying to control the muggles and are really good hypnotists
the dark
and are
wizards.
really good at manipulation. Those are not the kinds of wizards that we are. We are the kind of wizards that can just free ourselves. Yep. And empower ourselves and create the life of our dreams from within.
Actually, the Bible actually makes a distinction. They call it sorcerers. Sorcerers are the people that are trying to control others. And sorcery is black magic.
Yep.
Black magic seeks to control others. Free your mind. What can you do to break free from societal conditioning, stereotypes, and mind control in order to realign yourself with natural law? You're going to have to learn and implement how to use or do several things. Any ideas? Do you want to start shouting out ideas before I go through my official list?
Questioning everything.
Question everything, yes. That's a good one. So one thing you can learn is the trivium.
Yeah.
Whenever you have a problem, start working it. What, why, how? What, why, how? What, why, how? Going in that order. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is more than just the trivium.
Yeah, question everything.
Yep.
That was a good one.
Questioning everything, that's part of that. Learning the different aspects of critical thinking. It's not just, it's a broad thing. It's not just logic.
No, and mostly also question your own belief systems. Sometimes you just say, well, that's just the truth. And then you have to be able to create space around that and say, is it really? If it's really the truth, you will come back to it. If it's not really the truth, you can let it go.
Yeah, so you have to... So critical thinking means that you're actually turning your mind inwards and examining your own mind. In fact, this is, if you go to criticalthinking.org, this is the definition they give. Exactly. That you're able to turn thinking inwards upon itself to examine your own assumptions, to examine your own thinking, to make sure that you're actually being reasonable and logical and fair-minded and all these other things.
Yep.
And you can also use the Socratic questioning, as you guys do with that as well, in terms of, I guess that's critical thinking as well, but just going in and refining what you mean with your beliefs and what you mean by the sort of premises of your beliefs. It's like, well, I believe this, okay, but what actually is this? What am I saying when I'm saying this? What does that actually mean? Blah, 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 blah. And going inward and refining and refining.
Yeah, Socratic questioning is an excellent tool for
Definitely.
We use that in our sessions, as both you and Yarden know from our sessions. We do a lot of questions. We ask questions to refine until we find the belief, the core belief that's motivating the experience, so that we can change that core belief. And when that belief changes, then everything else changes. So that's where we
have to do critical thinking by yourself.
It helps when you have somebody to challenge you and hold you accountable for your poor thinking.
That is true.
Like that's what we do in sessions.
It can be done alone.
Yes.
You're right. It is easier if you have a community that does it with you. That is
yes, that's what we're trying to create with the Hive.
It's been very handy so far.
That's nice.
You feel challenged, Sasha?
No, not in an unmanageable way. It's just like you sit there and you go, okay, I'm kind of thinking this, and then you'll ask a question, you go, well, actually, no, I'm not actually thinking that. I am actually thinking this. And this is the core of the problem. But sometimes you just need that sounding board that will go, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shadow work?
Shadow work is the next one. So when we're doing shadow work, we're looking for those aspects of ourselves that are us. Like, how is this me? When I'm looking at my emotions and I'm working through a pattern, if we see something, if we know that the universe is a giant mirror reflecting back to us who we are, then when we have an experience and we see something and it really angers us, it sends us into an emotional trigger, then we're going to have to try to understand, how is this me? How is this not me? How am I because usually there's two positions. You can either be that or not that. Like my mom's way or not my mom's way, my dad's way or not my dad's way.
And sometimes even you're not your dad's way in something, but then in a whole different area of your life, you are like that. So that makes it even more like figuring out the clusters and seeing all the stories and how they fit together will make it less personal to a specific person on the outside and more personal to you on the inside, which puts the responsibility back on you.
Yeah, and shadow work and processing your emotions really will help you, and you're using critical thinking to do that. So you're using the sacred knowledge that, the universe is mental. You're using the sacred knowledge that, the mirrors process, which is the eighth unifying principle, and you're working it. And that brings us to the next point, which is processing your emotions. When you have an emotional upset and it comes to the surface, then you need to work through it. Yeah. And a lot of times, Facebook gives us lots of great opportunities to get emotionally triggered so that we can start seeing why we're so upset. Well, one reason, why am I even talking to these people? Why am I engaging in them in this way? Am I trying to get their validation? Am I trying to impress them or, whatever? Why am I talking to them? Why are they actually in my social network? Why are they connected to me? And so some people will go up with you and some people will just leave. Like Sasha, I'm sure you lost several friends from that exchange.
I did, and I dare say I lost the respect of others.
Yeah, but other people you grew closer to.
Yeah, and I definitely had people contact me privately even and sort of say, well, thank you for asking those questions as well. So it did create more of a community, and I know now who I can really engage in meaningful discussion with and who it's just I just cannot. It's not even possible.
Yep, exactly. So learning to process your emotions is good, but also learning sacred knowledge. So this class, we're going over the 7 Hermetic Principles and the 8th Unifying Principle. We are learning sacred knowledge. We're learning about the trivium. We're learning about critical thinking. Sacred knowledge, knowing what exactly, esoteric principles are. So learning sacred knowledge will assist you in freeing your mind. And this is actually why it's occulted right now. It has become secret knowledge. So occult means secret or hidden, concealed. A lot of these things have been concealed either because people just don't want to hear it. So, I don't want to get attacked, so I'm not going to tell them. Or it's secret because I'm purposely trying to make sure that people don't find that information so that, I'm going to add as much distortion as possible. So for example, when you look up trivium on Google, the first thing you're going to come to is the band. Everything about the band. You're not going to find anything about liberal arts when you look up trivium.
What? I didn't hear you find things about what?
The band. There's a music band called Trivium.
Ah.
So there's a distortion there. Google doesn't actually put anything about the actual trivium method of critical thinking and classical liberalism. They put stuff about a music band there. So they're concealing sacred knowledge. They're making it difficult to free your mind. So the trivium is actually part of sacred knowledge.
How do you get to this knowledge and sacred geometry and such?
Well, you just have to start looking it up and studying it, becoming interested in those things. Where? Well, you can find it on Google. You just have to go to the second or third page, or you have to ask better questions to find it. And also, if you
know books that have it.
Yeah, there's like trivium.org. You can look at. I have a page that dedicated with links on the trivium. I've got like 15 links on my trivium page for people to study it more. Okay, and lastly, hypnosis. Learn about hypnosis. You don't necessarily have to become a hypnotist, but I suggest you start reading books and watching YouTube videos by hypnotists so that you can start understanding how the mind works and how it can get programmed even by watching TV, how it gets programmed through school, all those kinds of things, so that you can understand how the power of suggestion works, so that you can prevent yourself from walking into traps and to doing things that will condition you to behave in certain ways. So I really recommend it.
Oh, sorry, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say I recommend just studying hypnosis at the very least, but also you can do self-hypnosis as well, where we do EFT sometimes where we'll just tap through the points and we'll talk about the things that we want to create in our life, or things that I am. Because if I am something,
we bridge it then.
Yes.
It's like it is a self-hypnosis, but it's not just we're just going to
mind control myself.
We're just going to completely overwhelm the mind to think differently. No, we do it in a way where we bridge it, where we find out first where we're at, and then where we want to be, and then we make a bridge. And that's what EFT is, which is not really hypnosis.
Right.
It's more fixing, like the false perception or belief to aligned perception.
Yeah.
Okay, intellectual character traits. I'm going to not spend a whole lot of time on this, but I'm just going to go through them. We're near the end here. When you do shadow work and you learn how to process your emotional upsets as they arise, you begin to develop and refine 8 intellectual character traits in your inner being. The first is intellectual humility. That is, you realize you're not omnipotent, you're not God. Now, just because God is within you, that does not make you God. Humility to know that you're not omnipotent, you don't know everything. There are things you don't know, and especially viewpoints you don't know. So when you start studying other people's viewpoints, you become more and more humble because you realize there's so much you don't know. Mm-mm. Intellectual courage. The courage to face difficult ideas even if you feel emotionally triggered by them. So a lot of the people that when they get upset and they start attacking you, they do not have intellectual courage. They don't have the ability to stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to value truth above all other things. I'm going to stand up and be courageous and challenge my beliefs. I'm going to go into this and I'm going to challenge my beliefs. Rather, they are biased and they defend their beliefs. So they lack intellectual courage. Intellectual empathy. This means that you have the ability to start asking why questions and to empathetically enter into other people's viewpoints. Whether they are biased or not biased, you still want to try to understand what makes them tick and why you're creating this, your experience the way you are in this argument with them. So you will actually learn more about yourself by entering into these other viewpoints. Now, it's not necessarily to agree with them, but it is good to still empathize and try to understand them, because through understanding, bridges are built. Understanding is the bridge between knowledge and wisdom, between me and you. Intellectual autonomy. This means that you're going to get so good at it that you are not going to need us in a session to do it, or you're not going to need somebody around you to challenge you all the time. You are now thinking on your own without other people always telling you how to do it or how to think correctly. You're now autonomous. You're self-sufficient in your own thinking. Intellectual integrity. This means that you are going to you're going to keep your integrity and hold yourself to the same standards that you hold others to. So if they are holding really poor logic and you call them out and you hold them accountable, you are just as capable of holding yourself accountable because you have intellectual integrity. You are not going to let yourself use a manipulative tactic just to win an argument, just like you're not going to let them use a manipulative tactic just to win an argument. You're going to hold yourself to the same standards that you hold everybody else to. That includes minimum standards of relating. And a minimum standard means that I will not interact with you unless you rise up to this minimum standard. So, but you also are going to adhere to those minimum standards because you have intellectual integrity.
That was the hardest thing the other day.
Oh,
that was so hard. I was just like, okay, I can't dip into that. But it was just so hard. Sometimes you're sitting there going, yeah.
Intellectual perseverance. That means that you're going to persevere until you discover the truth, and you're just not going to end with thought-terminating cliches. Can't we just agree to disagree? That's a thought-terminating cliche. It ends the conversation. Oh, well, that's life. That's another thought-terminating cliche. You're not persevering to the end. You're not maintaining intellectual perseverance to actually discover the truth, to actually understand fully what's going on. Confidence in reason. You become so confident in logic that you trust it to such a degree that you are always going to say, well, let's defer to logic. Let's try to understand why it's there. And you're going to you're not just proficient in it, you're just confident that it's always going to give you the answer that you need. You're never going to be let down by logic. You're confident in it. And lastly, fair-mindedness. That means that you are willing to be wrong and you're willing to consider other people's opinions and viewpoints and weigh them in a fair-minded fashion. You're not going to give something a bias just because you said it and they didn't. Or if they said it, you're not going to be biased like, well, they said it. I'm not going to be fair-minded and listen to that because it was them. You're going to listen to what they have to say in a fair-minded way, and you might be able to pick a few truths from that, even though maybe they're really distorted in their viewpoint. But you still might be able to pick a few things and to be fair-minded in your analysis. That means you're not just going to attack the bad things, you're also going to see the good things. Any questions about any of those character traits? I'll go back to them.
Not required in an order, are they?
Yeah, they are in order. If you go to criticalthinking.org, you can get those humility, courage, empathy, autonomy, etc. You can get those in order from that website, and it explains each one in depth even better than I explained it. So
I think Sasha's question was more concerned with do they have to go in that particular order to accomplish any which one?
No,
No,
they don't.
no.
They don't.
No. As you work on yourself, as you take your logic and you turn it inwards.
Double checking.
Yeah.
No, these aren't things. These are things to be aware of, because you can realize that, oh, I'm already doing a lot of these because I'm more aware of myself. I have more self-awareness than I used to, right? And I can see that I've developed this in some ways, but I can also see I have a way to go also.
Yeah.
So you just realize that these develop as self-awareness develop. As you process your emotions, as you do shadow work, you remove the ways where you are out of integrity, where you run away and you're no longer persevering, where you doubt reason, where you're not being empathetic. So you start finding those things and you can refine that, and you become more of all of these character traits. These character traits become more of a part of you because you process your emotions every time you experience an emotional upset, and you're being responsible. You're being responsible with your emotions. You're being responsible with your thinking. You're being responsible as a mother and as the father.
I have a question about shadow work.
Okay.
I never really understood fully what is shadow work.
Okay.
I mean, the whole process that I started with you was shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember that the pick was that I really, together we got onto to a specific shadow, and I've started working through this shadow, and things started to change and be better and less hurtful. But now I have this shadow still coming to my reality. It doesn't trigger me that the way that it triggered before, but it's still there, and it's even the same person and the person's cousin that is like still there, and they represent the shadow. And I'm just wondering, like, what is this shadow? What is it?
Well, we go in a spiral. We don't always address it one, it's not like you just go in and dig the whole thing out. You spiral around, and every time you go through, you get it to a deeper layer of this shadow. And so you're going to become more and more reasonable because you're going deeper and deeper into it. But you don't just become a whole unified self right away. You have to, you had said something about a ball of yarn. There's this giant tangled ball of yarn, and we have to go through it and untangle it. And as we untangle it, it becomes more and more entangled. But there's still a very deep knot within it. And until you get to that very bottom knot, it's still tangled until it's not. And so you know what your shadow is, you are aware of it, and you're shining light on it, and the light chases or it fills the darkness. Like the void attracts the light and it fills it up. But it takes time for every little nuance to be seen. And we go through this spiral inward until which point we get to this singularity within ourselves.
Do you guys prescribe to the idea that if you go back to like the first time you felt that emotion and kind of unwind that instance, it can quite often basically untangle all the ones that came after.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's but the thing is, sometimes you can't find it. So it is true, and we've seen results with it, both within ourselves and with clients. But sometimes it's just something that is possibly from a past life, possibly something that is just balled up in a whole kinds of different things. And then you could just work with what is here in the moment, because you could do that like that as well. But we do try to go before the age of 8. Yeah.
Yeah, because the age of 8 is where it started. For example, there was somebody that I worked with one time that had a kind of like a molestation at a certain age, and then a rape later in life. And after looking at the rape and the molestation, we went back even further, and there was this feeling when we found the very first memory, and it was doctors holding her down, putting needles into her bones, and they had to do it without giving her any anesthetics. And so that experience actually opened her up to the belief that her body is not her own and it's other people's. And so now she was a resonant match for people holding her down and doing things to her. So when we healed that first experience, she was no longer a resonant match, and no longer would attract these dense sexual experiences.
No.
And she would attract then higher sexual experiences after that, because they were no longer forceful. So it wasn't even a sexual experience the first time, but it had a connection to it because it was about her body.
Yeah.
I was just I wanted to when you answered me, Nathan, I actually wanted to ask you, why is there a shadow in general? And then when you talked, I started to think about I think in my experience, I'm just kind of getting on it, is it true that when I'm trying to engage with being a wizard that works with light, I would automatically attract the polar and the opposite, and the wizard that that is manipulating the masses, the elite wizard, because this is what happened. This is actually my shadow.
Yeah, well, it is your shadow, and it's because you're not aware of it in yourself. But from a strictly Jungian perspective, who coined the word shadow work, he said that anything that you're not conscious of about yourself is your shadow. So when you're not aware of it, you will call these things that happen to you fate, because you don't realize how you are creating them yourself. You think it's fate in life happening to you, rather than because you're not aware that this is in you. So, but once you start taking responsibility, it's anything you're not aware of about yourself.
What if right now the universe is structured in a way that whenever I heighten my frequency into the good wizard, I would automatically attract the bad wizard, and then I need to balance it, and it's a collective pattern I'm working on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think in a way that's true, because when we want to clear something, we first have to pull in the problem to then clear it. So in that way, that's what you're saying, right?
What is the problem? That's the first step of the trivium. What?
Yeah. Sometimes something happens to us, and we have had a lot of astral encounters, especially in the beginning of our process. When those energies came in, they were attracted to us. We were asking a question about certain things, and we wanted to know more, and so we needed to see more. And therefore, they came in and showed us. And then it was our job to bridge it and clear it. So it comes in for us to help us in a way. And then you clear it, and then it just doesn't happen to you anymore. But sometimes it takes a while. What's that?
I was going to say it's kind of like an inspiring factor, because you go, well, I don't want that, so I'm going to clear it.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't want that, so now I know what I do want, and now I can work on what I do want. But some people get stuck in the what I don't want, and then because they don't have the tools to actually work out what they do want, and they don't know all this.
Like counseling and stuff, like going over and over and over.
Yeah, and it doesn't do anything. It's for years and years. And in that space of talking, you might feel safe a bit because you're giving your responsibility over to an authority, or you perceived it to be an authority. But it doesn't actually help you out of the system. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Cool.
So that wraps up our class. Thank you for attending. the first Hermetic principle of mentalism.
Thank you. It was very, very interesting.
So, okay, so the next class will be on correspondence, the principle of correspondence, which is as above, so below. Thanks for attending, guys. I appreciate it.
We love all of you. Talk to you soon.